The cow tree, or as referred to in a totally accurate nature guide to the entity's realm, the meat tree, is one of the two landmarks in the Coldwind farm realm, along with the harvester. Currently it is able to spawn on all Coldwind maps and has received a lot of changes throughout the years. I would say that today it is in an alright spot balance wise, but during the early days of DBD's existence, this was one of the most overpowered loops that have ever existed in the game. Well, what was so different back then, and how did we get to where we are today? Well, in this video we're going to be going over the entire history of the cow tree in Dead by Daylight, so without any further ado, let's get right into it. The cow tree was planned to be in the game ever since the very beginning, as we can see from this early concept art in the official Dead by Daylight artbook. According to the lore of the game, the slaughtered cows are presumed to have been hung up there by the hillbilly sometime after he freed himself from his prison. You may notice that the design of the sacrificial tree is a little different from what we are used to today, as there is no palette to be seen in this picture. Well, did this mean that the structure just had one window vault and that was it? No, the cow tree actually had two window vaults, which were incredibly safe, as they were a fair distance away from each other and you could see the killer over the actual stone wall. This was what could then be classified as an infinite loop. Now, what is an infinite loop? An infinite loop, or just infinite for short, is a structure where the killer is simply unable to catch the survivor no matter what they do. The structure normally involves one or more very safe windows. But how is this possible, you may ask? Wouldn't the windows get blocked? Well, first of all, the entity blocker mechanic hadn't been introduced yet, which meant that a survivor could vault the same window indefinitely. Second, the vaulting animation for killers was more than 1.5 times slower than how it is today. Oh, and also, Bloodlust wasn't in the game either and would not be implemented up until the 1.5.0 patch in April 2017, almost a full year after the game's initial release. Now, this was arguably one of the most overpowered loops in the entire game. Survivors could hold killers here for more than half an hour and basically just hold the game hostage, as the endgame collapse mechanic hadn't been added into the game yet. There exists an infamous 25-minute video of true talent facing a survivor at the cow tree up until the survivor just decided to give up and let True have the win. This was arguably the most unfair loop in the game, as the only killer that could counter it was Trapper by using his bear traps, who wasn't really a popular character at the time, since his base kit and add-ons were quite lackluster and weak back then. Things definitely needed to change, so thankfully the developers acted relatively quickly, as just a couple of weeks after DBD's initial release, patch 1.4.0 implemented some pretty significant changes. With the release of the Fractured Cowshed map in the 1.0.4 update, which contrary to popular belief wasn't a part of the base game until then, Behavior implemented the much needed balance changes to the cow tree. Level design and art adjustments to reduce infinite window loops, added dynamic spawning of window blockers. Note, this is not to be confused with the entity blocker. What the dynamic window blocker meant was that on specific buildings, some window vaults would be blocked by barricades and therefore unable to be interacted with. This change affected several map tiles, but not the cow tree, as for that tile the developers chose to completely rework its layout. What did they change? Well, they just simply removed one of the window vaults and replaced it with a relatively strong, pretty much god palette. Killer players were generally really satisfied with these changes, but that wasn't all, as a couple of updates later, the cow tree would receive yet another nerf, although not a direct one, but still it could be classified as a nerf. One of the most notable balance changes in this update was the following one. Added a new mechanic that causes windows to become blocked for a short duration if the survivor uses the same window too frequently in a short period of time, only visible and blocked for the survivor. This is the mechanic known today as the entity blocker, which pretty much every player is now familiar with, but back then, this was something brand new. This change affected pretty much every window loop in the game, including of course the cow tree. Another significant addition to the tile was made during the 1.6.0 update, as of which the landmark would now emit a series of eerie ambient sounds for players in close proximity, which are reminiscent of cattle groaning. Over the next few years, the Sacrificial tree received almost no noteworthy changes. However, the loop was still very strong, as it contained an incredibly safe window and a god palette simultaneously. Furthermore, on some Coldwind maps the tile could spawn connected to other strong loops, such as for example jungle gyms or filler palettes. It was clear that more changes needed to be implemented, so with the Realm Beyond update, the developers chose to pretty much completely rework the entire loop. The Realm Beyond was a massive overhaul of almost all the game's props, environments and characters. Because of its scale, it was separated into several parts. The one we're going to focus on is number 5. The most noteworthy change from this one was a complete rework of every single Coldwind farm map. This also included an overhaul of the cow tree. The loop was made significantly shorter on both the long and short sides, making the window vault in the palette much less safe than before. Additionally, the stone walls were lowered so that killers like for example Huntress or Trickster could now throw over the loop. Furthermore, one thing that went completely unnoticed for a lot of players was that this thing, whatever you call it, which had been present on the landmark ever since day 1, was now gone, for whatever reason that is. But contrary to popular belief, this still wouldn't be the last time that the Sacrificial tree would receive changes, as a little bit more than 2 years after the 4.7.0 patch, the developers would change this loop once again. With the introduction of Nicolas Cage to Dead by Daylight, Behavior implemented new balance changes to 2 Coldwind farm maps, Fractured Cowshed and Rancid Abattoir, and also a few other smaller additions. Among them was an undocumented change to the cow tree. Basically, the loop was once again made even shorter, with the short side now becoming basically almost non-existent. Now, that was definitely an over-exaggeration, but you get what I mean. One more thing I wanted to mention is that a little bit before this update, with the release of the Roots of Dread chapter during Dead by Daylight's 6th anniversary celebration, the developers chose to add 2 locker spawns to the tile, for the simple reason that the new killer, the Dredge, required lockers in order for his power to function. This was also unintentionally a buff to other killers that needed lockers to reload, these being the Trickster and the Huntress. But other than that, I believe the cow tree has received no further changes since then. Let me know if I missed anything down in the comments, I would really appreciate it. But I guess that was it. We went through the entire history of the cow tree in Dead by Daylight. I really hope you enjoyed this video, thanks so much for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!